They tend to have real disappointment about the world. And that's the big one. Why are you so disappointed? Who told you in the first place that you were going to live forever? Who told you in the first place that like this wasn't what reality was, or that life wasn't just like this? Because you seem upset that it is like this. Mm-hmm. How did you get there in the first place?
Welcome to Bearing the How podcast, episode number 10. That's crazy that there's been 10 episodes of this thing. Man. So how are you guys doing?
That's awesome.
Great. Congratulations, 10 episodes.
Yeah, thank you. Where do you guys want to even start? We were just chatting about a bunch of stuff before this. So I know you were just talking about a bunch of stuff. You have some notes.
I mean, we could just jump right into it.
Let's just
Sure, why not? A proposition or a question or a
So I was
theme.
looking at this. There are a couple things. You had a really good line last time you guys were talking, and I wrote it down because I both agreed and disagreed with it. At some level and then at some level, right?
Make sure.
Do tell.
Don't mean to interrupt.
Check. Thank you.
Yeah, like just to like if you get outside of the mic.
There we go. How about that?
Yeah.
On my phone.
There you go.
And then I look right at it. So is this line? You were talking about seeing the world as it is,
Mm-hmm.
and that if you don't, there's a vulnerability that may surface as suffering. I definitely agree with that. I'm wondering if that's true always, and I'm wondering if there's ever a time that you go outside of that for certain benefits.
How so?
So I would think about, for example, things like hope and imagination require you to see the world not as it is, but as it could be. So not necessarily taking in facts just as they are currently, but the sort of potentiality of what they might become. You know, what a certain reality might be like. You know, so I wonder if I'm not sure these are like necessarily contradictory ideas, but if one just builds on the other.
Mm-hmm.
So first you see the world as it is, and
Mm-hmm.
you build on that and try and create new realities,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it as it could be. Your thoughts on that?
I don't see those in conflict, but I see it as like the concentric circles of facts or of reality, where you might say this is the way things are now, and so things are X, things could be Y. That statement is also true. You know, almost like, you know what? I'm gonna go down a little bit of get into the chess weeds for a minute.
Yeah.
I know Kris will be stoked on this. I hope this isn't too dorky for anyone listening.
No, it's not.
So chess is Kris teaches me how to play chess, just full disclosure. And I'm loving the process because I'm not really into games, to be honest with you, but this chess is like this exercise. Mm-hmm. And I was so attracted to it because everything you need to know is right in front of you. It's the one, I guess
it's a perfect game.
Exactly. Like aside from, what would you call that? Like any other endeavor where you might have sort of an end goal. It's the only competitive process that I can think of where it almost doesn't matter who's in front of you. You're always playing yourself. You're always, because you had all the information, you had all the same data. It's all the pieces on the chessboard. You start, the only difference being one person starts, but even then there's such a small fraction. Like anyone who's just a little better than me is probably going to beat me every time, no matter what side I'm on, right?
Right.
So there's something so interesting where you lose a game and it's a complete mystery why that is. And yet you're wrong, every time, basically. You're almost never right the whole time. So the difference between a good and a great and an almost perfect player is so profound that it's not like basketball, where I might just be really on one day and I'll hit a bunch of 3-pointers and then I beat Kobe Bryant miraculously. Even if he beats me 99 times on the chessboard, you knew what was going to happen more or less, So what I love, so Garry Kasparov played against the computer essentially, right, and lost, and that was this turning point where we were like, oh shoot, what we thought as human ingenuity and the possibilities, seeing this thing and all the creative aspects of chess, now is completely out the window. And even Garry has mentioned your average free stockfish chess computer will beat anyone every time.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. So here's where I'm going even more into the weeds. When I play a game, I could even play against the computer, and then you review the game. The computer will tell you which moves were good and which ones sucked. So the first move, it'll say, yeah, great, textbook move. And then you'll make a move and it'll say blunder or mistake. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, that was a bad move. So you just completely messed up your game, and the computer's just going to keep doing its thing. But then after the blunder, your next move, the computer will say, that was excellent. Because what the computer means is, given the circumstances, what you did was excellent. Even though you completely messed up, like you were destined to lose, but given that you now are in this crappy situation, what's the next best move? And I think in AA they say, like, do the next right thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come back out of the weeds. When you are kind of like in therapy too, they call this process comments, where someone will, let's say if the client kind of gets upset with me or impatient or mad at me, and I might say, whoa, it sounds like you're upset. So fact one might be, person is upset. Fact two might be, well, I'm upset because I wish things were this way. And that wish is also a fact. And if we're seeing the world,
it's
like, again,
data.
just like, yeah. And this is where the phrase might sound a little bit empty or too big. But if you're seeing the world as it is, all those possibilities are also facts. Like, the world can be X, might be a fact about the world. The world can be Y, might be a false statement about the world. And then you test and whatever. But anyway, that's my chess spiel. But
that's good. I don't play chess. You got to teach me.
I love it.
I said it before one time. I think let's play chess here. Like, play as we're doing a podcast.
Oh man,
that would be hard.
That would be
really hard.
That would be like a fun way to practice.
I wouldn't play my best chess, but
it would be bad
fun.
chess. Yeah. Well, actually,
or bad podcast.
There is a lot
and
of
good chess.
Yeah, right, exactly. If you one or the other, it wouldn't be not both.
It would not be interesting for the people to listening.
Right.
Yeah. So okay. So basically, you've got a set of data points, right? So it's just seeing reality is what you're saying. It's just basically it's just having all of that data. Having as much data available to you as possible, and then trying to see it as objectively as possible. Something like that.
Sure. Or even if I'm even at my most cynical about human nature or human capacities, even my shortcomings are those facts. Like, if I say, like, I listened again to Robin Hanson, who I love. I will plug him any day because he's very, very bright, but also very kind of quirky. And he was asked in this interview about a question that only he could possibly know because of his areas of expertise. And he said, I don't know. And the guy said, come on, just make a guess, And he said, no, I think he said, I don't understand this culture of having an opinion about everything. People need to have fewer opinions. And he said, I don't understand why I don't know isn't an acceptable answer to something you've thought a lot about.
Right.
Yeah.
Just say that,
Yeah, because not everyone's an expert in this idea.
Oh, of course.
You can't be an expert in everything.
What was it sounded like you had like an objection to that idea.
So one of my points would be, when are you not seeing the world as it is then? So what? Not you, but when in theory would someone not be seeing the world as it is? If it's just taking in data, we all do that. So what does it mean then to not see the world as it is?
Basically, to be mistaken or delusional about delusional in the loose, not the psychotic sense, but just like the Buddhist sense, where you're basically you're under a false presumption or something like that. But another reason I like the practice of meditation too is that I only post facto find out that I was under a delusion or that I was mistaken about something. I might think that I'm not worried about something, and then all I have to do is sit in silence for 10 minutes, and then it comes rushing back to me, and I realize I am. Or I might have expected something to happen. Even in a meditation, I might think, I'll meditate and I'll feel a lot better. And then I don't. And then I'm like, oh, well, I was way off, But so, I guess even if you notice, oh my gosh, I'm not seeing the world as it is, then that's a way of seeing the world as it is. Like, it's a way of coming to terms with that, or adjusting.
I think
really has to do with,
well, here's one. Or wait, I would like to know what you were going to say. Like, if you still have an objection. Past that.
So I'm kind of going somewhere. So my thought would be, and tell me what you think. My thought is that sometimes hope in a better future requires you to not have certain facts, or I don't like it that way. I would say it sometimes it's productive and beneficial to believe in things that you don't necessarily have facts for in regards to how probable they might be. So
Like what you're talking about faith.
yeah, exactly. So this goes a lot back to like faith and hope in general, right? But it doesn't even have to be like a religious thing. You can take this back to like secular humanism. So we were talking about this, where this is a really common one. You can do anything you set your mind to. You can do anything that you really, really commit to. You know, that's not really seeing the world as it is. That's not really a true statement,
Right.
You know, because you can't do anything. Now they'll say, well, I don't mean anything. I mean, you know, within reason. They'll say, well, even within reason, you actually can't do anything you want to do.
Right.
And so that belief itself, as far as I can tell, is not seeing the world as it is. It's seeing the world as it can be. But I wonder if at times you have to do that to create a new reality. So it's not necessarily going against the facts. It's just not necessarily having to be supported by them at all times, at every turn.
Sure.
So like an example would be saying, okay, so I want to, by the time I'm 35, I want to be a millionaire, right? There is a path that I could probably take to get there, you know. It's hard and would be an arduous task and would take a lot of time and a lot of failure and a lot of blank, 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 whatever. And statistically speaking, it's really improbable. So with all the facts on the table, it's incredibly improbable that would happen. But because it's improbable, should I just see the world as it is and say, oh, that's not possible. I can't do it. The facts aren't on the table. Or should I say, no. Despite the odds, I'm going to really step in, so to speak, and have faith that thing can happen. And I'm wondering if that hope, even though, again, it's not founded in a reality that's factual or...
Well, I see that it is. Or like including that hope. Like that, like...
Well, then nothing is not. That's why I was wondering.
Well, of course things are. Like if I said, I'm going to make $1 million tomorrow by selling lemonade on my street.
But that could be possible, maybe.
Well, and how? Yeah. So now you're doing it,
right,
you know? But my saying that and doing nothing, no legwork on my end, and sitting out there and saying 5 cents a cup, my expectations or my theory about how that's going to all fit together is going to be quite the letdown, right? Pretty different from $1 million.
Yeah.
But like even if you seeing the world as it is doesn't always mean something being proof or proven. Like I might not say I will only pay attention to what I have like chemistry level proof for, or like physics level assurance about. I might say, you know, I believe my family loves me, and insofar as that is true, I don't suffer as a result. And I will bump up against that if I go over to spend time with my family and they sit me around the dinner table and say, you know, Hunter, all these years we've never told you we don't really love you. You know, that would be shocking, right? Yeah. And I will have this whole time not been seeing the world as it is. I would have been missing data, or I would have been taking leaps that I shouldn't have. But hope to me is not incompatible with, really with anything other than just good epistemology. Like, and on that spectrum where like proportionate confidence, you know, where my confidence in making $1 million tomorrow on my cul-de-sac selling lemonade versus my confidence in making $1 million by getting really good at stock trading and then setting a 10-year goal for myself. I can be somewhere. I can say, you know, I'm like 90% sure about one of those, and I'm about 0% sure about the other.
So I guess my question is, where do you draw that line? When does something become reasonable and seeing the world as it is, and when is it no longer that? So if it's never 100% certainty, is it 80-20? Is that enough to see the world as it is? Is it 90-10?
Well, that to me, that is the fact. Like a probability is another fact about that thing, you know, where we have, so what was I can't believe I forget this, but what was the rocket that blew up in the middle of the air in the, I don't know, 30 years ago, something like that, maybe 40.
The Challenger?
The Challenger, was it? Something like that, yeah. And it was in the Mr. Rogers documentary, which is also fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
I still need to watch that.
Yeah, people were stunned, right?
Yeah.
So, someone along those lines, just by the way, everyone watch that documentary.
You have to.
It's on HBO right now.
That's your homework.
Yeah. So someone was not seeing reality as it is, as a gross understatement. Something happened in the shuttle, and it all, it all backfired. So there was the boots on the ground, kind of like screwing everything in, and gas gauges and all the electronics and things like that. Those are things that you might have close to 99% certainty about. But somewhere, I have no idea what the details were, but like whatever the thing was,
right.
Someone could have gone back and said, I'm about 80% sure about this, or I'm 70% sure, I'm 100% sure I checked this gauge, but I'm 80% sure that it's right. That fact might have saved all those lives and the mission, So the probability itself would be, and of course it doesn't always leave us with very much to work with. If I'm like, I'm 50-50, I hope this place is open, and I'm driving to it, then but proportionately I might get there and go, oh shoot, they're closed. And then I go, well, luckily I left 50% of this mental space. And then, or the opposite, right? Or I'm positive something is going on. And then I get there and I'm like, oh, I was not taking a true inventory, or I was overconfident, or I was, I thought I was, something like that.
Well, it's hard because we never have perfect information. And as far as we can tell, we'll never have perfect data,
Yeah.
So that's why this is a hard, and I don't really have an answer. This is just sort of a topic that I'm interested in.
This is
very loose.
I think about all the time. Well, here's a question I'd like to get both of your guys' opinion on. And you just brought up, when do you know, right? Like, when do you know?
When is enough to know?
Would you maybe think when you feel like shit all the time, that's a pretty good indicator that you're not seeing reality how it is emotionally?
I see.
If you feel shitty all the time, something needs to change. And then the other question I was going to bring up was like, what do you think about the idea that you choose how you see your reality? Do you think that's like a viable thing? Like, can we actually decide to perceive our reality a certain way? And maybe that's just talking about things from an emotional perspective. Like, emotionally speaking, I can choose how I react to this, no matter what it is. And that changes your vision of your reality. That's the question that I was wondering. And like, to me, it seems like that's when at least for myself, that's when I know I'm not seeing shit how it is. If I feel bad, I need to sit down and meditate for an hour and think about like, why do I feel this way? What's going on here? Like, so I need to figure out.
Well, tell me, this might change your question, but I just want to know the difference between feeling bad and needing to do something about it. Like so the difference between pain and suffering, for example, I find to be different.
Yeah, that is, it is for sure.
Like,
that's
if I'm sick,
really good question.
If I wake up with the flu, that is reality.
Yeah.
There's nothing I need to alter about my perspective other than just going, today's going to suck, or whatever is the case.
While we're on this topic, I would, if you don't mind talking about that for a second, all of us, because some people left comments in one of the clips that I put up talking about, maybe it was on Reddit, I don't remember, but some people were saying, they were like, everyone, they were arguing against that idea of pain and suffering. And they were kind of saying, someone said, well, pain is going to happen all the time. You're going to feel pain, but you choose to suffer. Like, suffering is a choice. I
think I said that verbatim.
Yeah, I think you said that.
Pain is inevitable and suffering is optional.
And then people were like kind of trying to go against that. Like, there are some people
they didn't like that.
They didn't like that,
I see.
and I agree with you.
I wonder if
suffering.
See reality as it is.
Yeah. It's a very, like, there's a lot of people that
the distinction. I thought it was a deep distinction when I was, someone convinced me of this, and I thought, no, of course you suffer every time there's pain, but you kind of like the Stoics said, you can change your relationship to the pain, but this, and again, this I hope this isn't. I'm not assuming too much about the general public, but I thought everyone knew that some pain was really not a problem. Like, anyone who's ever worked out, have you ever exercised? Right? It's very painful if you're doing it right. And in fact, that pain sometimes is an indicator that it's going well. That if you're on a really, really difficult hike or a bike ride, or you're lifting weights, and then the next day you're like, "Whoa, I'm exhausted." Whereas if you woke up in that state, you would think there's something wrong with me. What's going on? I have muscular, issues, and or if you're hungry, you can bear the hunger if you know that, well, dinner's about to be served, and it's really not a problem at all. And you see this light at the end of the tunnel in the form of dinner.
Right. But if you're fasting intentionally. Yeah, they did some studies with, if I can chime in. They did some studies with childbirth too, right? So they would ask.
I have personal experience with this. I didn't give birth, but
you did.
Direct hand experience of
and of course, extreme pain.
Yep.
But if you, on average, they asked, I think it was like 100 mothers or something after the fact. They asked them, were you suffering? And they said, well, I wasn't really suffering, because I knew that it was going to be worth it. And so it was pain, it was uncomfortable, it was a number of things, but it may not have kind of passed that threshold of suffering because of the way they framed it. But that pain and any other circumstance, were that not the outcome, right? Like a beautiful child that came from you and new life, etc., that could easily be suffering.
Well, my ex, because that's 100, that's a good example, because that is so painful. Like, it's most people see pregnancy as like insanely scary, so painful. But my ex, we went to hypnotherapy, like, as funny as that is, for birth, like for giving childbirth. And she did it all natural, no medication, nothing. And it was like a couple hours.
Wow.
And it was like, that's
hardcore.
Obviously it's painful, but it was not at all like what you would typically see, the stereotypical experience of childbirth. And that's a really interesting subject, just the whole childbirth thing. I just listened to a podcast, Tim Ferriss talking to Amanda Palmer, how she was saying the pain of childbirth it's so much different, because it's not pain because you're in fear, you're fearing your life and you're in danger. It's a different kind of pain. If you can see that and understand that beforehand, you could save yourself a lot of suffering. But that distinction of pain and suffering, I think, is important, because there are people that don't get that. They definitely like to think that they can't, suffering, I can't do anything about my suffering.
Well, I'll also plug, so that's pain without suffering per se, but the opposite can happen too. If anyone who gets jealous or angry, or road rage is a good example, because it's the height of tedium. Everyone does it. Everyone gets mad, and yet everyone knows it's stupid, and everyone knows it's a waste of energy. But sometimes it feels good. It feels good to be righteously indignant. You look at this asshole, right? Yeah. But if you never got road rage, if I could take a pill and never get road rage again, I would.
Yeah.
And because I know I hate it, and yet in the moment I think, well, look at me out here driving perfectly, like this model citizen, and scorning people around me who I have no idea why they cut me off. They might have a pregnant lady giving birth in the back seat that they're rushing to the hospital. Yeah. I don't know. So, or maybe not, or maybe the jerk in front of me makes me mad for 5 minutes, but he pisses everybody off 24 hours a day. I'd rather be me.
Yeah,
and yet it's totally lost on me that I'm suffering.
What is while we're on this, because I've talked about it in a different podcast, what is the deal with road rage? Why is it such a like...
What is the deal? I mean, you sound like Jerry Seinfeld.
Why? Yeah, I know. It's like,
hey, what's the deal with?
But it's such a fucking problem. Like, why do when people get in their cars become complete assholes?
Good question.
I have a theory, actually.
What's your theory?
So I've thought about this a lot, and this has a lot. I know this sounds really funny.
I've thought about it, because it's just such a weird thing.
I've been doing research on this. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
I've done studies out in the field.
I've done studies on it.
I'll pull people over and I'll go, what just happened back there?
What were you feeling?
I'll follow them to the parking lot of their work and
tell me.
write them down.
One part of it, and I'm not sure this is even most of it, but some of it to me feels like a hindrance of freedom. So people don't like, this is also why people don't like having to obey certain speed limits or stopping at red lights. It's a similar feeling of like, it's not what I wanted to do right there. What I wanted to do was drive 60 miles an hour straight and just not have to worry about it. I want to be able to kind of think about something else, and not, because we basically drive like second nature. I mean, most of us, we're not like, okay, so there's lines on the road and so right now I'm in the second lane over. I've got 4 more exits. Most of us are not thinking that detailed, okay, I need to have 2 hands here.
Yeah.
It's become second nature. I think what happens is we get in that autopilot and then someone cuts you off, and it forces you to get back into like first person, like first mode of thought. Like this is what I'm doing now, and I was doing something else, and now you brought me back here, and this I don't want to be on the road right now in my head. I want to be somewhere else that's more interesting.
Yeah,
right?
that's probably
so that might be part of it. Is it's someone else has kind of shifted your consciousness in a way that you didn't want.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think has to do with freedom, where it's like it's kind of a freeing feeling to be on the road. You're flying down the road, and you're doing your own thing, and you can go in any lane you want. You can drive at any speed you want, within reason, and it's fun, right?
Yeah.
You wanted to do this, and now they had different plans for it. So I don't know that I thought about that, like maybe that's part of it, but yeah, it is.
I've thought
weird phenomenon.
I mean, that's true. Everything that you just said definitely makes perfect sense. Snapping you out of your
right.
like kind of But the question is, the people that take it too far, because it's one thing to like have to slam on your brakes and you're just annoyed, but it's another thing to like roll down your window and start flipping people off and saying, fuck you, why did you do like that's a complete another level of like tribal. It's almost like the tribalism mentality that like immediately when someone does something to slight you, you
there's
look
a
at
thing
them
called
as a
the
predator.
fundamental attribution error, where if somebody is in a good mood, you say, like, what's their issue? Like, who made them so happy? But if they have a frown, you go, oh gosh, what an asshole, or what a jerk. Where you imagine that they're just a miserable person when it's a negative feature, and we're very slow to attribute positive character traits to people who are doing positive things.
I mean, I know there's not like a, but
I would guess there's a good evolutionary
like
reason for that. Like, and also people are so loss averse, where good things may happen and that's cool and everything, but losing. Like if I said you stand to gain $700 or lose $300, and I give you this $1,000, you're gonna face that very differently. Or you could save 700 lives, but you'll kill 300 people. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
People are not very good reasoners.
You think it's just like because we've evolved to see negative anomalies as humans? Like
partially,
we've evolved to notice.
I mean, with
bad
road
stuff.
rage, also, if you think about it, if you gave chimpanzees little airplanes and said, "Okay, go for it, get to where you need to go," it'd be a madhouse. The air would be a scary place. Yeah. You just look up and like we are like giving apes giant death machines and having us, okay, go to work, bye-bye, right? Can you imagine? Right?
It would be bad.
It'd be very bad.
Yeah, it would not be good.
It would be bad.
That goes in.
We are not evolved to drive,
Yeah,
let alone, we're not even evolved to write and read. We're overcoming millions of years against us to do something. And people are bad. People are forgetful and inattentive.
Yeah.
And it's a miracle we haven't died in a car accident.
Yeah. That's the thing. True. That's the other thing is I was going to say it's also life-threatening. So there are very few things
scary and anonymous.
It seems like people just don't think about that. Like when you're in your car, like if you really understood how dangerous it was,
I mean, we are in these
people would be more careful. You would think, at least you would hope.
This is why we lose upwards of 30,000 people every year in America. I think car accidents kill more people than people kill people.
Yeah, right. I think
worldwide.
It's insane. Well, what you just said a second ago it just popped into my mind as you were saying that the whole if you guys want to talk about it, just the algorithm topic with social media right now, that the algorithms, I was just listening to it on a Joe Rogan podcast. It's just interesting to me that these algorithms have been, and I don't know purposefully, I don't think that the people behind it purposely are like, oh yeah, let's make these to capitalize on people's tendency to be aggressive. Is it like the artificial intelligence has evolved the algorithms to do that? But that's the idea, is that people engage more on social media with negative shit. So the algorithms literally are trying to get you to like engage in a negative way. And it makes sense why Twitter is so fucking hostile.
Outrage, I'm not a social media expert, but when I've heard people like Tristan Harris and people who know a lot more, they'll say outrage sells.
Yeah.
So the algorithm, just from what they've said, the algorithm isn't to make people pissed off. It's the other way around. That people get pissed and they're more likely to say something when they're pissed.
Yeah.
So Facebook will say, oh, well, we're just you're voting with your clicks. If you click on this article that upsets you, you're telling us you want this article. Whereas you look at some article that already says something that you agree with and you go, oh yeah, that's nice. You just pass it by. So anyway, something like that.
Yeah, so it's just the opposite, that we have been the drivers of why the algorithms have. That's like, it's just unfortunate to think that, but it makes sense. I mean, it all the stuff that even like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, they talk about that. The way that our mind works, that we're evolved to see the negative stuff. Like that's what we need to pay attention to more, because the good, if we just see the good all the time, how are we going to advance and stuff? So,
well, I loved just another tidbit on behavioral economics. Daniel Kahneman I never thought about it this way, but I had read all of the studies that they do on remembered experience versus the lived experience. So you might go on a vacation and you come back from vacation and your coworkers go, "How was it?" And you go, "It was great. I went to Hawaii." And you go home and your wife says, "What do you mean? You were complaining the sand was too hot and the water was too cold, and hotel room was too stuffy." And they're reminding you that at the moment you didn't appear to be very happy at all. But I love that Kahneman points out evolutionarily the benefit would be to pay attention or to remember intensity rather than duration. So they did the, for example, like the prostate exams, I think they were, right? Where it's
the peak end.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the beginning and the end. So they might leave the fingers or the apparatus in the body longer at the end, because that pain is only more like a 3 out of 10, whereas the worst pain that you would experience was more like a 7. But if you end with a lesser pain rather than ending with the 7, you'll have a more positive memory of the experience. And also, if you go on, and if you go on the vacation and it was a 5 out of 10, just normal, you might come back and say, that was good. You might even convince yourself, it's worth doing again. Let's do that. And then you're happy with the remembered experience. But if you went and it was a 10 out of 10 the whole time, but then your child almost drowned in the ocean and you had to resuscitate them, and then you'll be like, oh, what a nightmare.
Right.
Because the intensity was a 10 out of 10. And if you think about it in the wild, like the harm, let's say you lose one of your fingers in a hunting accident 100,000 years ago, that is way worse than almost getting your finger bitten off 100 times in a row, because you actually lost it. So or losing a friend or something like that. So intensity staying below a certain number really doesn't affect not only your evolutionary outcomes, but your well-being, except for in that moment. So we can all put up with, if I give you a head cold and I said, you're going to have this cold for a whole month, in a year, you might look back and say, that was kind of annoying, right? But if I said, for a week, you are going to have the worst flu you've ever had, and you will be incapacitated, you might look back and go, that was bad. I'm going to really try to avoid that. And so there's something about, I hadn't heard that until in Thinking Fast and Slow talks about it, but he really described that. Daniel Kahneman.
Daniel Kahneman is the name?
Kahneman, yeah, he's a Nobel Prize
I gotta look that
winning.
up.
Well, he's a psychologist, but he won it in economics because they don't have a prize for psychology.
Well, that makes perfect sense. The advice to never don't end with your couple. If you're married, always go to sleep. Like, resolve your fight before you go to bed.
Oh,
you know what I mean? It kind of ties into that. Like, if you fight and then go to bed, you'll wake up the next morning still feeling like shit.
It's very common folk advice. A lot of people say that. My impression when I talk more to those people is just basically don't leave things unresolved.
Yeah, well,
because the tendency might be, if you are mad when you go to sleep, you'll wake up and then you won't talk about it. But if you wake up and then you go back, you resolve the issue or you go back into it, the sleep part is superfluous.
Yeah. And that also makes me think of, just think of like this whole search, the whole, this topic of people pursuing happiness rather than meaning. It kind of seems like you could tie that into that by saying, if you're only always pursuing like a 6 and you're trying to live in a state of a 6 your whole life, that's like not fun. If you're taking some kind of drug or you're doing things to just suppress a lot of the emotions, it's like, yeah, you won't feel like shit, but you're not going to feel the extreme highs either. But if you just let yourself kind of go through the peaks and valleys of life, you're going to have horrible shit days, but you're going to have the really high peaks too, rather than trying to find a way to medicate that and just live kind of stagnant, just, at a 5 or a 6. Maybe you can argue and say, well, I'd rather be at a 6 my whole life than feel depressed sometimes. But I would argue and say I'd rather feel like shit so I can enjoy the really nice moments more.
You would
too.
like the trade-offs. You wouldn't mind the zeros if you can get the tens.
Yeah, I totally don't mind the zeros if I can get the tens, you know.
So,
and I feel like it seems more probable to me, and maybe this is my pessimism, but that you're going to experience more zeros than tens. You know, at least I'm inclined for that more in my life.
So I was
we were talking about.
I was just thinking, self-report measures are so difficult to tie down. Like,
right.
You know, if Kim Jong-un was in the room and you asked any North Korean, how well is life? They'll say, well, a 10, of course, you know, because they'd be killed if it wasn't a 10. But maybe I can go back to the pain and suffering thing. Like, you might be in pain, you might be in a 0 out of 10 experience because of pain, but your, you know, I don't know if happiness as a very loose term, your satisfaction with life might still be a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So you might endure very painful situations or very annoying or irritating, including fights with your significant other, where you, in the back of your mind, you might think like, this is like a necessary evil kind of thing. You know, oh, I hate having to do this, but you do it.
Yeah.
And I like having kids too, raising kids. So many parents will say that they'll, you know, the most rewarding part of my life is having my children. It gives my life meaning. And you know what? I loved Michael Ian Black. He's a comedian actor who is great. And he was being interviewed on this podcast, and the podcaster does not have children, and he said, oh, you know, Michael, you're a father, you know, didn't it just change your life? And he said, no. He said, well, how was it? You know, he said, horrible.
Jesus.
And he's like, and the interviewer was trying to be all bright and shiny. But was like, yeah, but it's kind of redeeming, right? Like, there are those really high. And he said, no, for 2 months, horrible with me and my wife. And he was so honest. And he's like, yeah, everyone says, oh, they just, you know, the baby just completely changed my outlook on life. And he's like, no, not at all. He's not regretful about it, but he was just being honest about the pain involved to get to the, and you know, I think one of his kids at least is a teenager or something now, so they're way past infancy. But the point being, like, seeing the world as it is kind of thing. You're acknowledging the pain, but that doesn't. You're not going to send the kid back. You know, you're not going to get to like age 5 and be like, let's just put him up for adoption. This is just not worth it. You know, most people stick it out, and that's amazing. Because it's so hard to raise kids.
So it's weird. I don't know if we're sort of getting away from that point. I want to say one thing on that point.
Yeah, whatever. Please, wherever we're going.
So the other thing about the numbering and the framing thing and the self-reporting, it is hard because a lot of that's a relative scale. It's relative to yourself, but also relative to the time in your life, right? Yeah. So like what might be a 10 experience for you today in 10 years might not be. Right. You know, that might be a 15. Something that's either unattainable or the other way. It might be a 4, you know, depending on how things shift. It's really hard because do you measure current states based on peak experience? Do you measure them based on averages in the last 24 hours? Do you measure them based on what? That's also why this is hard. You know, it's not like you're checking off like a rubric. Okay, so if I do these 15 things in a day, then I must be happy, you know? So I did 9 of the 15, so I'm like a 7 or something. That's so difficult, you know? But I do get your point though, you know, and I think I'm the opposite. I think I'd rather hover around 6 or 7, like my whole life, and have almost no zeros and no 10s. Because 6 or 7 is pretty good if you just kind of just do it. I mean, you just kind of see it as it is. But the other thing is 6 and 7 can become 10 with proper framing, right? So that's one of the things where it's like, well, why is it a 6 and a 7 and not a 10? What is it that you need to make it a 10?
Well,
what
that's
is it
the
that
question,
you feel like you're missing? And then if you really dig into that, I think a lot of times you'll find people say things that are somewhat superfluous to happiness. They say, well, if I had more money. Or if I got more like validation. Or if I had more sex or whatever. It's like, really? So that's all it would take to get to a 10. A lot of times I really do think that if you frame it in a certain way and realize that those expectations are not necessarily needed, it's not a necessary step in your happiness. That you can have happiness at a 10 without all those things. I think that's a really productive conversation.
I mean, that's it is a productive conversation, and that's the thing that I am exploring myself. And we talk about this stuff often in different ways, but what I'm realizing and what I just go through every day is there has, looking back at just like everything I've gone through in my life. I mean, this is just like a deep philosophy, Buddhism maybe. I'm not sure. I haven't delved into Buddhism much or anything, but there hasn't been an experience in my life where when I'm suffering, it isn't directly tied to me having bullshit expectations. Yeah. It all goes back to like, in my mind, what are my expectations? If they're not met, of course I'm going to suffer. So you like, when I can get to that place in my life where it doesn't matter what's actually happening, if I can mitigate my expectations, you're not like, I'm not going to suffer, you know, and I'm not, I still all the time, every day I'm going through this shit, but my life has definitely profoundly changed, just kind of becoming more aware about this stuff and talking about it in depth and having all these different conversations that really, in my opinion, right now, just what I'm experiencing, expectations are the cause for, you know, you feeling like shit.
I think it was Elon Musk, right? Didn't he say that happiness is life minus expectations? And
it is. I mean, it's like what you're saying. A 6 is like, why can't that be a 10? Right, and it's because you're expecting more if you want a 10 and you're at a 6. It's all like your expectations.
I do think...
like physical pain, that's like obviously a different thing. If someone's punching you in the face every day, like, you know, it's just a completely different conversation. But like emotionally speaking...
Yeah. I think you can have general expectations that are really healthy. But when those expectations manifest themselves in really specific ways, right? So like, for example, like one expectation I have in life is to be fulfilled by my line of work. Mm-hmm. But that could surface in that could look a lot of different ways, right? Which allows me every day to meet that expectation if I frame it, you know, correctly.
Mm-hmm. But it's like you said on that other podcast, you're like, the relationships don't change. Nothing changes. Right. It's your, whatever you said, you're like it's your, you know, and it is like.
Exactly. So like I could go into work with a vague expectation that I think is healthy. Something like, I want to be fulfilled today. I want to do something productive. I want to help someone. That's it. Right. That can be fulfilled in so many ways. So chances are I will succeed at that, you know, because that's a pretty general expectation. Mm-hmm. But like if I go into work with really specific, like today, I'm going to talk to my principal and I'm going to get $10,000 of funding today, or I won't have a good day. You know, like, okay, that's way too specific. First off, and two, it's kind of not seeing reality as it is in the sense that it's way out of your hands. You know, like
this would be good for our cliche podcast idea.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like
there is a big cliche about the word kind of like the word judgment. Mm-hmm. Like, don't judge. I don't know. I have qualms with that also.
The judgment, or both of them?
The phrase "don't judge" or "I don't judge," meaning that you're like the word judgment is always bad.
That it's innate.
Like if I gave you a compliment, if I said, "Oh yeah, that was really insightful," I'm making a judgment about what you said. You know, about your comment. Happens to be a very positive one. It can be like, compliments are judgments. You know,
our language is so sloppy in that sense.
Yeah, I know. We need more. I mean, this is how words evolve and change. I get it. It's fine. But just I try to catch it before it escapes my lips. You know, if I say don't have an expectation, I mean, it'd be like if I didn't show up to work one day and my boss called me and said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Oh, sounds like you really had an expectation about me being at work today, didn't you? Yeah. Maybe you should adjust that, right? You'd be less unhappy, right? Right. Hey, that's your problem. Am I right? Yeah. I'm enjoying myself at home. My expectations are okay. Please, right? They had a rightful adjust expectation about me making a promise or a commitment, you know, to show up to work. And similarly, I might expect something completely reasonable if I combine 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, that's going to produce something, and that's not. There's no buts about it. You know, that's not even a wishy-washy, you know, that has a probability of one outcome, you know? So, seeing the world as it is also might be just a form of knowing what to expect rather than whether to expect, not having no expectations or some expectations, but what are your expectations or what do you expect? How do you expect that? And then, like we were saying, just proportionately, you know, if there's a 99% chance that I'll show up to work every day, but if a business runs with a if a business runs with a 100% expectation that everyone will show up every day, there's going to be a crack. That's the Jenga tower where the one day you pull exactly. And it'll all tumble down, right? Because the one person is inevitably something's going to happen. Because again, another expectation is that life will be the same all the time. And then if it's not, that's where the suffering is. But if I don't expect life to be the same all the time, then I don't have to have a perfect prediction. I just have to not expect it to be the same all the time. And then change happens, and then you go, right, of course, because everything, of course it did.
I like that. Just thinking of it more in terms of like getting better at knowing what to expect. It's kind of like that's the goal, is try, and that's what wisdom is, right?
You had asked, so I apologize, I'm just now getting to this, but when you talk about choosing to react to your world or to see your world differently, it is true that everyone has a predisposition to some, I don't know if I want to call it positivity or negativity, but our outlook largely is personality and temperament and a lot of things that we did not choose. But we can learn absolutely to change. And I had a very bleak outlook when I was younger, and I just the world was a depressing place. I was really high strung, and it was not good. And it's what I also don't like doing, because it's profoundly untherapeutic, is to treat people like there's a switch in their brain that they can just flip it basically, and their whole life changes. Oh, everything's fine. Didn't you realize? Because some things are not fine. And I don't know how else to say that, but I would.
Yeah, there are people doing that right now, making it sound like, why the fuck don't you just see it?
When a client comes in, I work in addiction also. If a client comes into recovery and they're 24 hours sober from a very, very long addiction, and they're just jazzed and ready and like everything's going to be perfectly fine and life is good and there's no reason to ever worry or become upset or to imagine that things won't be perfect. That worries me way more than the person that goes, wow, life has sucked for a long time. I don't insist that people can present however they want, but again, the vulnerability is what I'm concerned about. I love the positive outlook. It's great, but I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't expect somebody, or actually grief and loss is probably a better example. If somebody lost somebody close to them, the prescription might not be just, come on, cheer up. Everything's going to be fine. Right. There's a place for acknowledging that things are not okay. But again, the difference between pain and suffering totally matters to me. Yeah. So someone can be grieving. In fact, clients have told me this in the past when I have been a little too eager to change that. So anyway, just giving a space for the positive and the negative in terms of experience and not in terms of suffering. Where if I, just like working out, there will be days that I feel fantastic because I've been working out and days that I feel in pain because I've been working out. Yeah. But overall, my relationship to both those things is the same. It's just all par for the course. Yeah. Which is why I admire a lot of like athletes, let's say, at the top of their game. They go through so many extreme, their lifestyles are so extreme, and they might not be enjoying, quote unquote, they might not be pleasurable to go through some of those things, but they wouldn't change it because they want that outcome. Yeah. They're okay with that outcome. Yeah. Go, I got to go to camp and blah, blah, blah.
Like everything you're talking about makes me think of two people that I admire a lot, David Goggins and Jocko Willink, because they're both they're good examples of the opposite sides of the spectrum. Like they both are insanely disciplined, hardworking, like athletic, physical, like the shit that they put themselves through. But Jocko is like always positive. Like he just has a very he's kind of more toward, he kind of goes down the path of just change your mind. Like you can sense that in Jocko, that he's very why don't you just see it differently? Mm-hmm. Why don't you just do it? And then Goggins on the other side, where he grew up with the victim mentality, and he talks about it a lot, that it was like a fucking mental, psychological struggle every fucking day to push himself to do the things that he did. And it's just funny, that dichotomy of these two people, very popular right now. Yeah. Like both of them kind of teaching the same thing. Like you have to put yourself through suffering I guess Jocko doesn't say that, but Goggins does. Like, he says often, you have to suffer. Like, you have to suffer to learn who you are. And then Jocko is more like, just do it. Just don't stop. Like, just keep going. Just keep doing it. Just don't stop. And like, anyway, what were you about to say? You looked like you were about to.
No, I was going to say, because that totally just sparked this. There seems to be profound wisdom in paradoxical truths. So this is a great example. So like Jocko is coming from this school of thought that's very like, just do it, just change your mentality, just get after it. Get after it.
Good. That's his whole thing. Right? That's
Monday.
It. Literally.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, Monday. Yeah, that's right.
Jocko, everyone's coming and word bubbling.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. He is so funny in that way. I mean, it's inspiring.
Yeah,
right?
it's inspiring.
But also that can be, and this is one of the, this really is, I think, a perfect example of like, there really is no one size fits all. There really is no like, if you just always do it Jocko's way, you'll always be better off. If you always do it like a Goggins way or else. It's so relative to the individual. It's so case by case, and this is one of the problems with a lot of these phrases, like you were just saying, don't ever judge. But well, that doesn't make any sense because like you were pointing out, there are moments when you absolutely need to judge, and we do it all day long, all the time anyway. A lot of this is a semantic issue. Like, what do you mean by judge? Like, define judge.
How do you guys define judge?
Well, I get what people mean. This is Kris and I talked about this too with cliches. They
mean it in the negative.
It's
way,
a shorthand for
they only bring it up.
It's a shorthand for don't negatively evaluate me without understanding me.
Right.
Or that's what I get from that. Right. Exactly. Like there's more than it just like someone will be eating junk food and someone will say, don't judge me. And what they mean is like, don't think of me like a glutton for eating this junk food. I'm not a bad person. I do care about my health, all this stuff. Or even as a joke, like, I know you're looking at me and you're thinking of me as someone who just eats junk food. And you might even be wanting junk food, but you'll scorn me or you'll criticize me for doing this, like this whole spiel. And it's just a shorthand. But
and that's the hard part about this. And I was thinking about this, and I wrote this down somewhere in here. But I really think our generation-ish is kind of confused about what wisdom to follow, because there's so much contradictory wisdom. I mean, you're literally seeing. I mean, in one day on Instagram, if you spend like 15 minutes just going through certain memes, like I follow some of these like. And I always send them to you, and there's always like grammar issues and all these like motivational memes. Drives me insane. Anyway, these people that spend all this time getting this incredible graphic of a lion and with like the perfect lighting, and they put the words in the
attention,
right place, all this energy into that meme, and then you can't even get like out of 9 words the grammar correct.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Or you mess up like the plural
or it's or something,
or like the conjugation's wrong.
It's the intention behind it.
Oh, that's fine. But
do you care if I tell you the story about your aunt?
So much.
Do you care if I tell the story about your aunt? I thought that was so funny. How she messaged me on Facebook and was like, and sent me a long paragraph talking about the grammar mistakes I made in some of the podcasts.
Was that my aunt or my grandma?
Your grandma. That's right.
I love
that. Oh yeah, she's sweet.
That's
she's
perfect.
Really sweet. Yeah.
She knows how to live life the right way.
She's so sweet.
But memes. So what I was saying is, you'll see one motivational quote that says, "Don't let anyone else tell you your worth. Know who you are. Don't listen to what other people say." Right? It's not important. And then you'll see another meme that says, "Surround yourself with wise people. Listen to advice at all times." Right? It's like, what the hell do I do? Do I not listen
Birds
to
of a
people?
feather flock together, and opposites attract.
That's right.
Tell me about that.
And so, and I see this all the time. And I've made a long list on here just because I find it fascinating of paradigms that are seemingly paradoxical. They're opposites, right? And no wonder we're so confused. No wonder, like we were just talking about, where do you get your validation? Well, one meme will tell you very wisely that you should get it from no one but yourself. And another meme will say very wisely that you can't always trust yourself, and it's good to listen to other people's advice, right? And so this is very Tao, by the way. I'm going to kind of slip that in because I really think this is super Tao. Is that like the opposite of a profound truth is another profound truth. And they're not necessarily opposites. That's really like a semantics issue. They're actually like, they're very much complementary. But in our society, we see them as opposites. So for example, the one meme that says you want to get validation from yourself, and the other meme that says, no, you want to listen to other people, and you can partly improve yourself by listening to others, whatever. So they're both true, but not all the time in every situation, right? So this goes back to like just know thyself, know what situation you're in, right? Know what your goal is and what's going to get you to that goal faster or whatever. And so I think it was Bohr. Niels Bohr said, he's the physicist, and he said basically what I just said. But what's the full quote? The opposite of a small truth is a falsehood. But the opposite of a profound truth is another profound truth. That's the whole saying in context. And what he's talking about is, for example, like, the opposite of, I don't know, like
an object at rest stays at rest. Yeah. An object in motion stays in motion. And you would think motion and rest would be opposites, but in fact, they're both. That's what inertia is both of those tendencies.
Right.
Or like a color spectrum. I don't know if you're going for that. But
I was going to say, like, one claim about this cup could be,
like
this
half
cup
full, half
is
empty,
red.
And it's both.
Yeah, or like this cup is red. Well, that's obviously false. So the opposite of a small truth, something that's insignificant because no one really cares about the color of this cup, is a falsehood. So the opposite of the true statement, this cup is blue, would be anything that like contradicts that. So simple, easy. But the profound truth is much, much, much deeper. So you would say like something like you were just saying, but also everything that we're talking about, right? So the opposite of don't ever judge, judging is bad, is judge, evaluate, learn from those judgments. It's not always bad to judge. And they again seem like opposite ideas, but they're totally complementary when you learn how to utilize them together. We talked about this in regards to work and play.
Yep.
Some people think of work as like this one part of their life that is so opposite to play, like they're in no way the same thing. But when you realize that, like, oh, you can put some of the play in your work, and you can put some of the work in your play, and that makes everything better.
Yeah.
I just find that like really interesting. This idea that these profound truths,
like you said, there is no. It's relative. It kind of just, which is like a very postmodern thing to say.
That's
right?
what's hard about that.
Well, I just want to point out, if you are telling people not to make a judgment call, you are judging the act of judging, and you are judging people who make judgment calls. Yeah. So don't be a hypocrite.
Well, here's something I think is like everything that you're saying, all of this stuff kind of, and I know you're going to have something to say about this, but like kind of seems like it goes back to all of these things are true in certain circumstances. It's relative depending on what you're going through in your life, depending on the people you're with. It's all true, but it's like one thing that I often refer to as the focal point is behind all of it is what's my intention behind it, like judging, not judging, surrounding myself, whatever, all these certain things you can think to yourself. And I know, like, how do you know what your intention is or what is it? But what's your intention behind judging? Why are you judging? Because you do have to judge. Like, you have to judge in life. There are times when you have to judge, like me being a manager, hiring people, I have to think about things from that type of perspective. And it goes back to what's my intention? Am I judging to be a fucking asshole to make myself feel better about myself? Or am I judging to figure out what could be the best, what if this person's going to be the best fit for the whole team that'll make everything better? Like what's the intention behind judging or not judging or expecting or not expecting, which, that's something I think about is what's the intention behind it? What's the deep, reason why?
Yeah, I think that's it. Well, and if I can kind of like Jesus smuggle for a second.
Do it.
Well, I'm going to do it anyway.
Not smuggling anymore.
Oh, darn it.
Just right out in the open. You're declaring it at customs.
I was waiting for you to ask me, like, how do you know your intention? What is your intention?
Well, and that would be a great...
That's what I'm here for.
That would be a great question. And that goes back to the Daniel Kahneman thing, like the narrating self and the perceiving self. You know, it's like you can think you're making all these great intentions, but you may not be, you know, because we lie to ourselves all the time, and don't really like realize it.
That's a question. How do you know when you're lying to yourself? Because if you know you're lying to yourself, then you're fucking aware of the fact that you're lying, So
man, I don't know.
how can you, like, because people say, like, Because people say, like, you're living in a delusion because you're lying to yourself, right? You're lying to yourself, and it's causing you to live in some kind of delusional reality. But if you're lying to yourself, don't you know you're lying? So can't you think like,
man, this goes
thing?
into the whole, there's so much good stuff.
We have like more than an hour.
I know.
We have like
Okay,
an hour
real
left.
quick. I want to say the
Okay,
Jesus
5 words
thing.
or less.
Okay. Well, I want to say the Jesus thing real fast.
Oh, yeah.
I already said it.
Sorry.
So it's like, but because I hate when I listen to a podcast and they're like, okay, he never said that point,
right,
and then
right,
it just got lost. I'll just say it and then we can move on. It's not the act as much as the thought, right? So if you view a man with anger in your heart, right, then it's the same as killing him. Or if you view a woman with lust in your heart, it's the same as committing adultery. That's sort of like, ooh, it's really important what you're thinking, not just what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's not just Jesus. That's also the Buddha. That's also Tao. I mean, they all talk about that sort of thing.
That's
think the
something.
importance of intention.
Why you? Oh, sorry. I don't want to finish.
No, that was all I was going to say.
Oh, that makes me think of like,
it's like a perennial theme.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes me think that I don't really agree with that. When what Jesus says that if you have lust for someone, you're committing the adultery. I don't agree with that. I think like you're going to think bad shit all the time. Isn't that the point of like Christianity and religion, is to help you get through the fact that you're gonna sin and think bad shit? It doesn't make sense to me that he would say, or whatever. This is just, I'd like to get your opinion, but it doesn't make sense to say like, it's putting such an insane judgment on someone, like, oh, you can't even think badly. Like, that's not possible.
Yeah, I would say it has less to do with don't think badly and more to do with try your best to condition yourself to be the kind of person that thinks these things less, right? Because you also don't want to just be like, well, I just think things and I don't have any control over my thoughts and it's all just impulse.
Yeah.
You also want to have some sense of like, okay, like when I was 19, I looked at every single girl as an object, and now I don't. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's progress.
Well, see,
right? but there's a conditioning there.
Looking at a girl as an object is an action, because it's one thing to think like, God, I want to fuck this girl or whatever, but then to act on it is, isn't that the point?
This is just a semantics issue. So you could also say a thought is an action. I mean, you can say any of it.
But I would say that an action, at least in the terms of Christianity and stuff, the action is when it goes outside of yourself and begins to affect other people around you. Because that's something that I would think would be like, that's part of being a human, right? Is you're going to think shit that's wrong, you're going to sin, you're going to make mistakes, but the point is to keep it from creating bad realities outside you, right? Anyway, it's just like a pushback.
No, totally. But I want to push back on that and say all behavior is a response to thought.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So there's no behavior that just like arises out of a vacuum, where it's like, oh, I randomly act that way. I had no idea I would do that. Oh, really? Because you've been staring at women like objects for the last 10 years, So I think that's why Jesus makes it such a big point, that it's like, don't just temper your behavior, temper your mind, right?
Oh, and I agree
really
with that.
try and control. That's what he was saying.
I think you should temper your mind. I just think it's impossible. Like, I don't agree with the fact that thinking of having sex with a woman is committing the sin. I don't agree with that. Like, that's just my opinion. I think that's the whole point of being a human, is you're gonna imagine things and you're gonna think things that are wrong, and the whole purpose is don't let that shit consume you and don't act it out. Like, figure out how to mitigate that.
Yeah.
So I would just, because I think people feel like shit if they think, just thinking this, I'm a sinner. Oh God, I'm sinning just thinking this thing.
Yeah,
it's like,
and that's also
I think that's
bad.
a little harsh.
But that's also just bad theology. So that they haven't completed, they've only taken half of what he said in context.
Well, that's why I want to talk about it. Because
totally. And we don't have to go super into Christianity. I just want to say one more point on that, is that if you could live any way you want and think any way you want, isn't a world where you don't have those thoughts a better world than where you do, right? Or where you don't have anger, right? Isn't that a great place to try and get to? I would say, yeah, right? On the whole, in general, it's better to not than to have those thoughts. So anyway, but also you have to think Jesus was always responding to something that wasn't going right in religion at the time. And so the Pharisees were they would only deal with behavior. Yeah. And so he said, no, it's not just about behavior. It's also about thoughts. You have to also take those captive, So anyway, we can kind of stop that there. But yeah, no, I'm glad that you kind of pushed back, because I do think that there is I think like I agree with you that they're not literally exactly the same, but his point I think is still well taken by like I think we would agree with the general point that it's yeah. Like you want to also control your thoughts.
I agree. Well, I agree with that makes perfect sense, and it is like I'm glad we go into it because I know that there are a lot of people that aren't religious or that aren't going to church or whatever that it's like it's too heavy. It's like I can't handle that. Like I make too many mistakes or whatever. But my point, and I agree with you, is I agree with that. Behavior starts with the thought, so you got to figure out how to like
so you start there.
Get to the thought. Right. I would just say, but don't feel bad if you have a bad thought. Like you shouldn't feel like shit.
Yeah.
Like, you need to mitigate that because you'll feel like shit all the fucking time if you're just like But anyway.
And that goes. And so if I can ask you guys now, because we were kind of going there anyway, and this kind of circles back to the first point about like delusion and thoughts and like how true are the things we think, and like we're always kind of telling stories to ourselves that that aren't even necessarily true. But I'm wondering if that's always bad. Now that we know, like we just established this like paradigm thing where it's like, okay, well, some beliefs are good sometimes, and sometimes the opposite of that is good. So that's sort of like the paradox of truth. I'm wondering how that also can transfer over into areas of like, into areas of self-delusion, into areas of like, is it ever good to be deluded about something? Is it ever good to tell yourself a story that might not be totally true, but helps you in some way get through something?
I guess it depends what the goal is.
God, that is it's such a
I feel like the answer is yes. And that's what I was kind of saying about like seeing reality as it is. Like I say, start there. Start by seeing reality as it is. But there might be moments where you got to tell yourself kind of a story to get out of something.
Well, and also,
I don't know.
I would still push back against that and say, it doesn't even seem possible to see reality how it is. Isn't that still up to your subjective perspective in the end? It's still how
then that's...
I guess as best you can.
As it is doesn't mean you have a God's eye view of the world. That doesn't mean... I mean, not the way I say it. It doesn't mean be a calculator. It means if you really can put your finger on some basic or some observational truth, start there and only move when you're sure that you're sure.
So I guess that's the question though. If
you're not, dial it back.
Is certainty like the litmus test of what? I mean, because we're almost never sure of anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But imagine imagine living in that world where everyone is like, I mean,
right.
I'm not sure, right?
Right.
Why don't I hear that more often?
Yeah,
because
definitely the opposite.
We're not, right?
Yeah.
But so I don't know. Maybe it would help to use a real time example. Trying to think of like a story. Let's take this. Somebody thinks their boss is mad at them. Right? Very common story. We all have a boss. Boss's job is to be critical in some ways. So I might go to work and I might come home and go, I just think my boss has it out for me. They gave me this weird look in the hallway and they were really critical about something I just turned into them. And so you could start there and you could say, okay, well, what do I know to be a fact? I know that I show up to work on time every day. I know that I've never had a problem with my boss. Those are true. I know that I get along with my coworkers and I don't have anything that I can identify. If I'm really being honest, if I were my own boss or if I were somebody else's boss that were doing this, there wouldn't be anything that's really on the table that would get me in trouble. Okay, that's kind of a relief maybe. Is there anything I'm aware that's going on with my boss personally that would make them upset with me or in a bad mood or something? You can go there, right? And you might say, well, I'm 50% sure, I'm 50% not. But then outside of that, the only thing you really know is that today at 3:32 p.m., your boss looked at you and clenched their eyebrows together a little bit and had this kind of strange, frustrated look on their face. I have no idea what was going through their head. I have no idea why they might have done that. A lot of people do that all the time. I've gotten that look from other people in the past. With other people, it has come to mean that they were upset with me. Yet in this case, I know none of that. So what you really, really know is almost nothing about the situation. So if I'm seeing reality as it is, I might be open to the idea that it's not really up to me at the moment. And then what? And then you could do something. You could say, well, here's a possibility. I'll go to my boss tomorrow and say, hey, is everything okay? I just, saw this kind of scowl on your face yesterday, depending on your relationship with them, and ask, is there anything I can do to improve my work or something like that? But the story would keep you up at night. They're pissed off at me. I'm going to get fired.
No, yeah.
You come to work the next day and your boss comes to you and says, I'm so sorry. I got in this fight with my partner. And you're like, and all that wasted energy. Again, the pain versus the suffering.
Yeah.
It
almost seems like the way that, like, you explaining that story is like a really good, people go like all the time. That is something people go through.
It's very common
or whatever.
I do it all the time.
Yeah. But to me, it seems like what would make sense for me to like really understand that and say, you know what, that's fucking, I get that. And I would think of it more of like, rather than try to see reality how it is, it's almost like saying, don't judge. It's almost like saying, rather than try to see reality how it is, don't create a reality that you don't fucking know anything about. You know what I mean? It's almost like where you start to get into trouble is when you start to create these stories about, oh, well, my boss did this. What is he doing this? Is it this? Is it this? Because in the end, you still don't see, I guess it's your subjective reality. See your personal reality how it is, because at the end of the day, you don't fucking know if your boss is mad at you or not. Like, you don't know what's going on at his house or her house, what's going on with them, and if they were mad at you or if they were judging you. So it's almost like, don't start presuming, like, don't create a reality. Take what you know and go from there, rather than thinking of it as like, see reality how it is. But I guess that's part of it.
Those seem synonymous to me.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm not seeing the distinction, but
maybe. Yeah.
No, I think it's a different way of saying the same thing.
Same sentence.
Yeah. But
see reality as it is, and therefore don't not do that.
Right. Yeah. So just like we were just saying, how there's no one size fits all, those are perfect examples of where you want to see reality as it is, right? I think an example of where you might not is egalitarianism is a perfect example, where reality is that people are not all the same. Reality is that people don't all have the same value in terms of function. Reality is that, like, evolution and science does not support the idea that everyone is equal in really any way. We're all very different. But we've created this sort of intersubjectively agreed upon imagined reality that, no, we are all equal in value, that everyone has something to offer. And right? That's not even totally true. And just from a rational standpoint, like scientific objective, seeing reality as it is, the secular humanist perspective doesn't see reality as it is, but it's an imagined reality that's useful, and so we all agree upon it, and it helps to make society better. So that would be an example where, as far as I can tell, we're not seeing it as it is, but we're sort of creating new realities that morph the current ones, I think, in positive ways. Even though the whole thing itself wasn't based on what is, it's based on what we wished it was. That makes sense.
Maybe this is not the case, but in the world of disabilities, it's more obvious that we do this, that we make these exceptions, but I don't see, maybe calling oneself a secular humanist and saying maybe the act of saying something like that would be a story that is maybe not true. Like, everyone is the same, but here's how I see this could be compatible with seeing everything as it is, right? That it's not that I think, so maybe a wheelchair being the quintessential, like, person that can't do something that most people can do. If a person can't use their legs, there are certain things that they cannot do that require legs specifically, right? But the value of creating a world that person wants to live in is speaks to a larger truth, which is that none of us chose our circumstances. So if the real, I don't know, the baseline truth is that I didn't choose to be a guy who can use his legs. And this person, if they were able to, would probably choose to use their legs, or you could ask them and then they could confirm or deny that truth. And the fact that none of us chose to have a chromosomal disorder, to have Down syndrome, to have, whatever the case may be, we are trying to create a world where we don't start making exceptions for what type of human life is valuable. Where if I start to say, okay, if your IQ is under 50, you don't have a place on this earth, and then we're in Sparta, and now it's cutthroat, and then the slippery slope and stuff like that.
Is what you're saying humanism, or is it going against? Like, what is?
Well, this is where the rubber meets the road. When people like secular humanism is like the response to a religious value of humans as individuals. Like so religion could come up with a story very quickly about God made us all and he wanted us to be this way and blah blah blah. So you have a story, right? Secular meaning non-religious, and humanism meaning focused on the well-being and experience of humans needs a story as to, so someone might say, okay, well, we ditched God. Now I want to treat people as though they were valuable. How do I account for that? How do I describe that? And it's taken on its own story where all people are unique and valuable in the same way, when it's very easy to find a situation where one person might be more valuable than another. Yeah. If you talk about like drafting in the NBA, right? I am not as valuable. I am way less valuable than anyone that's on the court right now. Even the third string guy on the bench he's going to kick my ass in one-on-one every single time, all the time, right? And I'm okay with that, and I don't need it to be the case that I'm as valuable as him. But if the whole world were the NBA, what would you do with the third stringers? What would you do with the 10th stringers? Okay. What would you do with me? And you need some reason that everyone gets a good life, or that we provision X amount so that everyone can have an equally good life. But I think people are very aware of this. It's this compartmentalizing in different places. If you go to like a disability department on a college campus, people are very understanding and people are very accommodating. And I work with the deaf, right? It's very obvious to me that deaf people need certain attention and they need interpreters. Yeah. And with an interpreter, they can do everything that I can do. Yeah. So it's not a problem that somebody needs an interpreter if everyone's signed, but not everyone signs.
So I have a couple of questions, I don't know if it's not really pushing back, but it's just kind of, I think this is important because I know that there's probably people that are with the alt-right crowd that can use that argument to start to like try to make their group seem superior than other people's group, IQ, whatever, all this stuff. So I'm just curious, where is like, what is the question or the line that you draw with every person is valuable? Like where, how would you argue against someone who's alt-right saying,
I'm not interested in, okay. So first of all, any group identity that you did not choose can become a problem very quickly when you're trying to cooperate. So if you and me have a common goal at all, we don't need a reason. We'll do that goal. We'll do that thing, So even the most sinister alt-right, even if the alt-right says we are smarter and more physically capable and more XYZ, fill in the blank, right? Innovative or whatever, that is all, they're assuming that those are good things because of what you can do with those qualities. But that might not be what anyone is interested in. They might be in a league of their own, and everyone else says, oh, well, the kinds of experiences I'm interested in have nothing to do with being better than someone at that. It's about, let's say, suffering less, right? So if my child has Down syndrome, for example, and by definition has a lower IQ than the general public, the joy or the satisfaction of being with that person, or the joy and satisfaction that person can derive out of life, will have to not involve their IQ. It'll just be a different task. Mm-hmm. So I don't say, so this is why people are vegans and vegetarians, right? They're not saying, well, a beaver isn't as smart as me, so I'll eat it, right? Or, possums are smarter than other rodents, so I like it. Or like sloths are even more like splitting hairs. It just, there's no reason for that, right? Yeah. We just go, look, generally speaking, a cow didn't choose to be a cow, and a horse did not choose to be a horse, but we understand that you can suffer nonetheless. And so in what ways do we each suffer?
Yeah.
So again, forgive me if years of meditation and therapy have completely fried this neural circuitry in my brain, but the competitive aspect of this group over this group doesn't, or pride, in your skin color or where you were born or something like that. Again, forgive me if I'm missing something. Maybe someone can fill me in. I thought the idea was to move away from those kinds of differences. I thought the idea was not to emphasize what we did not choose about ourselves, and to be cool with that, and to, again, if we're seeing the world as it is, to just acknowledge, oh wow, you came from this, ancestry or this long line of genetic reproduction. And anyway, can we get back to life right now and get back to enjoying ourselves and connecting and stuff? So I'm not interested in someone's feats of accomplishments just because they happen to come from, again, their skin color, right? It's just not that consequential when it comes to suffering. Your psychological experience of suffering is what I mean.
Well, that's a really
obviously people. I hope I'm speaking clearly. I'm just kind of going, and other people have said this stuff much more clearly. I think
it's important to go into it like you're going into it, because that's the issue, right? Is people start to try to, I guess the question is, why do people try to put skin color, IQ in certain things above? They try to put those things above, and they use those things as the judgments to, try to make other people feel less valuable, and
sure.
That's, and it's a deep question, but I think the question that here's a question that I don't know if you guys care to answer or not, but do you think life in general is like intrinsically valuable?
No.
So, okay.
That's it.
What about you?
That's all I have to say.
I don't know. I'm sort of undecided. I think.
What do you have to say about everything he was just saying?
Well, I'm still trying to figure out where any of that comes from an objective scientific perspective. It's not subjective and imagined.
If you can suffer and you think that's a bad thing, then you have a value system. You have ethics.
So, but then that value
short of
system,
that, you don't.
It's just a
rock on planet Mars has no ethical demands.
But it's just relative to each individual, is what you're saying. There is no meta-ethical claim. There's no overarching
Oh, no. I mean, it's all subjective to me. Well, so I don't remember the name of the short story, but there's a village or a town of people who are just enjoying themselves and partying, and short story even shorter, there is a young child of this town or village, I don't remember, who is in a basement somewhere suffering endlessly, so that for some cosmic reason, I forgot the reason in the story, but that this person bears all of the suffering for their community in order that they have this 100% perfectly enjoyable life. In that world, the ethical demand, that's a very utilitarian, it's kind of an argument against utilitarianism, because then the reader notices this person and you go, oh, you need to solve this problem. Why is this person suffering so much? And so that would become the paramount ethical issue on hand. So insofar as people can be in true states of misery, you want to get away from that. And if you do, in fact, then you have ethics. And ethics to me is also just kind of a word that we made up. Morality or ethics is it just is the process of figuring out how to suffer less, and whatever that means. Whether uploading consciousness into simulations and just living there for the rest of eternity, or and everything in that bag, including meaning
like that's
and
things
blah blah blah. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, but so regarding delusion or seeing things as they are, that I would never dispute that someone can be momentarily satisfied by a story or something, because we all do it. We all would like to think that we're really good people and we make really great decisions, really informed and really thoughtful, and yet we all do stupid things, and we
Right.
we interpret them as being less stupid than they are, and stuff like that. So it's not that we need to become perfect scientists all the time and scrutinize each other. There would be more and less honest ways of coming to terms with the world that we do live in. But I said this last time I was here, just the delusional part is just a vulnerability to me. That's not to say people aren't born and then they die living under a complete delusion that maybe did something for them. I would have no way of knowing that unless I was that person.
Mm-hmm.
So my kind of like follow-up question would be, I wonder what that person's life would be like if they truly had access to the way the world was, or if they made a different effort. Like it doesn't even have to be superficial stuff like skin color. I mean, it could be sports teams. Like one thing is, oh, I can't believe you're a Dodgers fan, you should be a Giants fan. Another thing is, I can't believe you're even a fan of baseball. And another one is, I can't believe you care about sports. And you can you could go backward. I'm not advocating that people just stop watching sports, but in a way, you wonder how much of it do you really need at the end of the day? Like, what if you needed less? Kind of like the having fewer opinions thing. It's not like have a stronger opinion about something else,
right?
Or you have this opinion and now you just make it this opposite one.
Yeah.
What if you just did less
sometimes
first?
less is more.
So I'm curious.
Yeah, maybe.
I know you asked him. I'm curious too to like get the opinions. But so you don't think, it seems like you don't think that there is a universal ethic. Like you don't think that there is this universal morality,
like a rule or something like that.
Like a way to put it. Like, I'm don't know. I'm not trying to be like Kathy Newman. Oh, so you're saying? I'm just.
No, yeah.
I'm asking like if you believe there's such a thing as like a universal moral code that everyone could, if they had the capability to go by those rules and those ethics, it would help everyone and everyone live a better life. Like a universal overarching.
There might be. I'm going to bring it back to chess. This is very maybe there might be one best move where there might be really truly one way out of something. Like is it Peter Singer that has the drowning child in a shallow pond analogy?
Yeah,
example. It's like, look, if he uses it as this paradigm example where a child drowning in a shallow pond where you can just reach in and save a life, do that. And that might be the best ethical move because it's just that obvious. But like in other times in chess or wherever in life, there might be 1,000 different best moves, and any one of those would be good. And depending on that move, the next move would change. And so no, I don't think that there's one thing all the time that everyone should just be doing. But I think there are certain moves that are pretty good all the time.
Okay.
Like protect your king, or don't lose your queen, or generally like don't lie. Try not to don't make people in physical pain if it's avoidable. But I'm not a deontologist. I'm not like a no running on the grass ever, no matter what, no matter how late you are to class. Right. I could come up with an absolute rule.
System.
And you think that that's what religion is trying to do? All of these religions?
I think religion's doing a lot of things, not just one thing. I'd be very trepidatious to say a sentence like religion is blank and only blank.
Yeah.
I don't think I could come up with a sentence like that.
That's because you're smart. And you know that that's a bad sentence.
Thank you. I've been waiting my whole life for someone to tell me that.
And we're done. That's all we need.
All right, it's a wrap.
All right.
Get out of here. I really needed to hear that.
Yeah, okay, so great.
Yeah, because I'm
so if I could sort of chime in. So I guess one of my big points in my head kind of floating around right now still, and I think I figured out how to put it into words finally, is I'm wondering if function is more important than immediate apparent truth. So I'm wondering
what does function mean?
So once you've set goals, right, what is going to get you to that goal best or fastest or most effectively? Most often, you want, actually, I would say probably always you want as much information as possible. So I'm still on board with that. With more information is better, right? Almost always. But I'm thinking, for example, like a man on his deathbed, he's 85 years old and has cancer, right? There are a number of stories or narratives he can tell himself about his current situation. say that the doctors give him like a 10% chance of living, right? And this has happened over and over again where that happens. Okay, well, he's got like a 10 to 20% chance of living, and it's probably like in the next year he'll be gone, right? If he just accepts that, the chances that will become the reality increase. If he doesn't accept that and he tells himself a story contrary to that data, right, contrary to the probabilities of his situation, the chances that the opposite will happen increase. So the chances that he'll overcome it, or the placebo effect kicks in, or whatever else, and there is science behind that too. Mm-hmm. I guess my point would be that, like, in that moment, the raw data would suggest that he should just accept his fate. That's the way it is. That's probability, blah, blah, blah. And so, but if he's telling himself a story that itself is not totally true, right? If he wakes up every morning and says, no, I'm going to beat this. This is going to be great. I have no doubt in my mind, right, that I'm going to beat this. The chance that he'll beat that significantly increases. We now know that, right?
But why is that not true?
Why is what not true?
Why is that hope or belief, or it sounds more like an aspiration? Why is that in conflict with the truth?
I think truth with a capital T, it's not. But this, and that's why I think there's a really important distinction there, because the truth from like a God's eye view, no, right? It doesn't contradict that. So,
I see.
Yeah. So
you think it contradicts the seeing reality how it is, though?
Because of what you said. We can't see reality how it is. We can't see all the information. We don't have all the data points, right? So from like macro perspective, it never contradicts truth, because I don't think you really can, but from an immediate perspective, what information do I have? How much do I know? What are my odds of living?
None of that is false, though. Like that person is still acting consistent with the world. I mean, even having a hope is like, if having the hope makes you feel better and you want to feel better, then having the hope seems like a perfectly congruent thing to do.
But the point is that the story he's telling himself is not necessarily a founded story. It's not necessarily supported by the science. It's not supported by the evidence. The story, for example, again, is I will survive this. Actually, the odds are you won't. So you're telling yourself a story that is against the current reality, that's against the current probability. But because you're doing that,
probability is not. I don't know. I might be more like the guy. I might not. The pessimism of a 10% likelihood is another story. That because the doctor told me 10% when they don't know, but I'm guessing, it might be rational to take that on and go, oh, okay. So there is a 10%. So you're telling me there's a chance, right?
So you're telling me there's a chance.
Like you're like, okay.
I agree.
So like but it wouldn't be a false story. It would be like a hopeful, like, I don't know that hope, I guess I should say it like this. I don't know that hope has a truth value. Like being hopeful about something can't be a false.
I think it does.
Sounds like I'm just.
Well, you could. Well, sorry. It'd be like saying if you said I'm really depressed, and I said no, you're not. Right? Either you're lying, or that statement didn't make any sense.
Yeah, right.
Or if you said I'm so hungry right now, and I said that's false, and as if you would just check in and go, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm not hungry, right?
No, but sorry to interrupt if you don't mind, just because I feel like there is this kind of thing going on where there's like this miscommunication. And it sounds to me like what I would say, listening from the outside, is that it sounds like you are kind of pushing back, saying that it's almost like there's no such thing as objective reality.
Not that we can see.
Yeah, and then
we will never know the truth.
It's like you're saying. It's like you're saying. You're saying that everything that he's saying is included in the reality that you should try to see, right?
Yeah, and that because we won't know for sure, I couldn't. Let's just say I will never have the God's eye view. I'll never be able to see every particle in action, including my own brain. And but if we mean anything by truth, or we mean anything by discovering truth, or using data, or collecting information, or learning, I should say, then what we mean is we can we can interpret and articulate something that is consistent with the way the world is, such that we can use it and get somewhere else that is also true. So like chemistry or physics or something. Like if we can put somebody on the moon, we accounted for enough data that, so I don't know what's in a black hole, but we didn't need to know that to get to the moon. We just needed to know what's between here and the moon. So you can get there. And kind of like with illness, if I know that being hopeful is going to be better for my beating this illness, I might be hopeful because I'm using that. I'm like, almost like I'm tricking my own brain and body, and then do that.
And that's part of the function of it.
Yeah, if your goal is to survive.
I mean, it almost sounds,
if your goal is living, right?
Just to throw this out there to get opinion on it. This is a really hippy, like hippy dippy thing, but almost sounds like what you're saying could be interpreted as, rather than saying try to see reality how it is, it's like you're saying try to create your reality.
Well, it's
like
that is the same thing to me.
And that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
you can create your reality based on the facts you choose to focus on, and then amplify them in a way that changes your narrative in a way that makes your life better. And Peterson talks about this, right? Like you can never take in all information.
Yeah.
It's always channeling through this very narrow gate. Our scope is really narrow on reality because we can only ever focus on one or two things at a time, right? And so the guy on the deathbed can think, okay, 90% chance I'm going to die in like a year, right? Or he can think, okay, 10% chance that I'm going to live, And so it really is just a reframing of reality, and it's which narrative do you want to choose, even if you choose the one that is less supported by your current situation. It's less supported by the realities and science behind your current situation. That's what I'm saying. So the immediate truth is like, no, you're probably going to die. But in his head, that's not the truth. In his head, he's trying to figure out that bigger truth, by partly telling himself a story that isn't itself founded in perfect reality.
I'll throw a different wrench into this. In hindsight, everything has 100% probability.
Right.
Nothing
that happens.
It doesn't make sense if you said, well, did you eat breakfast today? And I said, yeah, 50-50, or if I said, there's about an 80% chance that I ate breakfast today.
Yeah.
It's almost like, it's what would you call it? It's a joke. It's like an old person joke. It's like an Alzheimer's joke. That's like, how, I have no idea. I don't even remember, right? That you almost like, I'm not a good authority on that. You have to ask someone else.
Right.
So, and the reason it's funny is because it's so obvious, because everything already happened. And if you said, how likely is it that you actually went to a different elementary school than the one you went to? Makes no sense. But if you were in kindergarten and I said, how likely is it that you're going to go to this other elementary school? Different conversation, right? Because we can't predict that part of the future.
Right.
We don't have enough data. But so in terms of creating your own reality, or here's where I part ways from the New Age. The New Age would say that there's something cosmically free about that behavior, where you are not bound by nature, the laws of physics, the world around you, et cetera, that you can make a choice that is independent of whatever you got going on. You look lost. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Double checking the camera.
Just wondering.
Didn't want to make sure the laptop.
Just checking in.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Checking in.
Just noticing. So
good job seeing reality how it is.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm trying my best. So so I guess just there's no way that you could know that is happening. That there's some aspect of you that is truly unbound by the world and the universe as it is. Yeah. But the other way, maybe a more Petersonian way of looking at it, is that because you are completely enmeshed with the world around you, you are your world. Your thoughts are you, and your thoughts are the product of everything that's ever happened to you, that you are participating in your world, whether you like it or not. So whatever you do end up doing or deciding or thinking, that is going to be the way it goes because you don't have another option, right? As opposed to, and Peterson's good at rallying people like that, like where just when you thought you could be over here being miserable and that you thought you weren't affecting anyone else, he lets you know no, that badness, that spreads because everywhere you go, you're in a bad mood and you're talking negatively to people, and the outcome is always going to be bad for everybody. So don't just do it for you, but you'll be the first to benefit. So anyway, if I'm taking probability, there is some perfect situation. I can just imagine the guy on his deathbed, right? He has this year-long prognosis. The doctor saying you have a 10% chance of living might mean something like only 10% of people in your circumstances end up living. But if you were God, you could rearrange particles of the universe, or you could say, oh, all you need to do is eat more spinach, drink more orange juice, and take Advil, and some weird combination that you never knew because we just don't have enough data.
Yeah.
But there is a 100% circumstance where that person does not die.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of 100% circumstances where he does die.
Yeah.
So the role of like having a good attitude or being positive or something, I interpret that as adding as many ingredients as you can to make it more likely that one of those ingredients gets you to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. So if I want a job and I go to the interview and I'm wearing sandals and cargo shorts and my hair's messed up and I'm disheveled and I'm not wearing a shirt, and the boss says, I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to be right for this. And I say, I showed up on time. What do you mean? I wasn't late. And they might say, well, that's not the only thing that gets you a job.
Yeah.
So now I got to dress the part. I got to be on time. I got to speak well. And so there's this big grab bag. And anyone who's ever left a job interview, not exactly sure whether they got it, is a great sample of the subjective experience of uncertainty while trying to put yourself within that high probability margin where you're like, okay, I did what I think is 100% of what I could have done to get this job. I'm hoping it was enough. And if the Venn diagram overlaps and what the boss wanted versus what you did, if those end up being the same thing, you get the job, right? But we'll never have enough data to know perfectly. There's no amount of interviewing or, we're always guessing a little, like driving, going back to that. We're all driving around going, okay, 10 and 2, I hope I live, I hope I get to where I'm going.
Yep.
And miraculously, we made it here today.
Right. Yeah. And in order to not be afraid on the road, you have to tell yourself the story that you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But that's part of what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you.
We tell ourselves stories all the time that aren't necessarily true or supported by the evidence. So this is the point I want to kind of push back with, is that every belief, and we've talked about this, right, has some faith in the sense that we're not really certain about anything, So what closes the gap between mystery and certainty would be something like faith. Like, oh, well, that seems to be true. The odds are that's true, so I'll believe that, right? But do you
think that's how people use the word faith? Because I don't think that's true.
No, I don't. Well, I don't think most people use that word in religious context. I don't think they use it the way that it should be used. But so I might be defining it in a slightly different way.
How do you think people use the word faith that you would push back against that?
People tell me they use the word faith as a bridge where they explicitly don't have reasons to get to the other side of the. I don't know what we're bridge the gap, right?
Like justifying, it's almost like a justification mechanism.
And people will massage that word a lot by saying, "I have 9 out of 10 reasons to believe that God wants this thing for me, and so my faith gets me that one extra point to make the call or to pray or to believe or something like that." But I don't know how to say this in a perfectly succinct way, but I try not to have faith. I think Noam Chomsky said that one time or something. I liked that. I really try not to do anything that I wouldn't. I try to not make any wagers or any bets that I'm not proportionately confident about. So I know that there's a chance I could die behind the wheel anytime, and that some of it would be out of my hands, some of it is in my hands, but my confidence level is enough to get me behind the wheel.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say something like, I just have faith that I won't die, because I don't. I might die. I might die today on the way home. And if I do, you guys could talk about it next week on the podcast. But that'd be interesting, because it'd be like, okay, you lost that wager.
Yeah.
But most people don't die.
Yeah. So I understand. You're just keeping it
faith never
grounded.
enters the picture if I'm allocating my confidence proportionately, which is no one's perfect. I'm not great at this, but I try to be better at this, right? But the faith as a word never enters the picture insofar as I don't want to believe something more than I already have the confidence to believe it.
I see.
But nothing's 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't enter the car afraid that you'll die.
Mostly not. Yeah.
So, but why is that? But
that's a glitch too, because cars are not part of our evolutionary past, and we are abnormally afraid of snakes and spiders.
Yeah.
Stress from fearing snakes and spiders is more likely to kill us than a snake or a spider.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that is just a glitch of the human system.
Well, that makes me ask that makes me think, like, what you're saying makes sense. That makes me, and Jordan Peterson says something like this all the time, but shouldn't we all be in a state of extreme anxiety because we're going to fucking die in like 60 years? I mean, and it's like what you're saying, it's a glitch that or maybe you can think of it that way. It's a glitch that we all aren't afraid of the fact that we're going to fucking die pretty soon and not experience anything anymore ever. Why aren't we afraid of that? Or does that have something to do with the existential?
Why would you be?
I mean, I don't know.
Like biologically? Why aren't we worried about it?
Yeah, I mean, why? Yeah, biologically, it seems like if we really understood, like if we really could grasp and understand the concept of death and this life ending, we'd all be like, shit, like this, constant.
I mean, I think in Victorian times or some kind of recent amount of time ago, people would keep human skulls on their dinner tables and just to remind them of the fact that they're going to die, basically. Yeah. And Buddhists will do this. They'll have these almost like an open casket, but just a body on a hill before they cremate somebody, or they'll have like a death ritual. And I think Greeks, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Greeks used to even prop up their dead relative. Like someone would die in the home mostly, and they would just kind of observe the life and death cycle.
And these are all things to remind us of the fact that we're going to die, right? Because we don't.
So in a way, it will really like if you do think about your most tedious moment during the day, or sometime where you're impatient or awful, if one of your dying or dead relatives could all of a sudden burst into the room and go, by the way, you're not going to be around much longer, so think about really how you want to spend this time.
Yeah,
that would whip me into shape pretty quickly. Yeah. That would snap me out of it. And when I do think that way, it helps a lot of the time. But there's also an evolutionary story to tell about why that also wouldn't be adaptive. That if at the age of self-consciousness at 6 or 7 years old, you started thinking, oh my gosh, Mom, one day I'm going to be dead, right? What should I do, for 60 years? How should we spend this time? And then your life is just one big existential crisis. Yeah. That wouldn't bode well for hunting and gathering and reproducing and mating and socializing and blah, blah, blah.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
I don't know.
And I think we do have coping narratives. I really do. And I think the best answer is not necessarily coping narratives. It's not necessarily telling stories that aren't true. I'm not saying that's really even the best answer, but that's just what we tend to do, Well, I just think I'm here for a reason, and I have a purpose, and I have a calling, and and these are all sort of coping narratives, I'm not making a claim as to whether I think they're absolutely true or absolutely not true, but the fact that we don't know means that at some level they are narratives that they're telling themselves that may very well be imagined. But I think it helps a lot of people, and you hear that. We hear these phrases a lot, right? I'm here for a reason. Yeah, those are I have a purpose. I have a calling on my life. Like I'm here to do something, And I think that narrative is another perfect example of like what helps people be better and live better lives, and what helps people be more productive and really pursue the things that they love, et cetera, et cetera. But that itself may very well be an imagined reality. Yeah. That itself may very well be a narrative of non-reality, so to speak, or an untrue or like a fictional story that they're telling themselves. But I'm not convinced that's bad. I'm not convinced that it's necessarily bad for someone to say, for example, I have a calling, I have a purpose, there's a reason I'm here, right? I almost always find that someone who has that mentality on a day-to-day basis is a little bit more like get after it.
Yeah.
You know, they're a little bit more like, I'm gonna like live my life, and I only got one shot. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Than the person who's like, you know, like we were talking about, like the
Very nihilistic.
The hard nihilist is almost never as happy, productive, out there. So this is my point. If I could kind of make one point, is that it's like, this is a perfect example of where an imagined reality or a fictional story that you tell yourself may at times function better than the alternative.
For what function?
For happiness and health and living a life that feels meaningful and fulfillment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right?
You think the nihilist is seeing things clearly?
I mean, I don't know. Then I'm making claims about what I think is actually true in the world. But I do. I mean, you even just said it. Like, we don't. You know, it's so hard because I feel like I'm talking to two audiences. Honestly, it's like, am I going to talk to like my Christian friends right now on here? But anyway, y'all can just kind of hear what I have to say.
I mean,
but
if it's the truth,
yeah. I mean, it's hard because I would skirt that line differently depending on who I'm talking to. Honestly, part of me feels like there isn't innate meaning, and that we have to kind of create it as we go along, and that narratives and imagined realities can be part of that process. Part of me thinks it's possible. It's possible we have this like innate meaning that's cosmic and universal, and I don't know. I'm really agnostic on that, you know.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, the hard data, the hard science supports nihilism a little bit better than it supports other ideas. But we should probably be very clear.
How would you,
exactly,
just to define
which parts of nihilism, right? So I'm specifically talking about the parts that say that there is no innate value or there is no innate meaning, that it has to all be created, that really, what's even the point of it all? You know, like, what really is the point? I mean, we're going to die anyway in 1,000 years. No one's going to remember almost anything we did. And eventually the whole earth is going to burn up, you know, because of the sun. So, I mean, maybe the nihilist is actually onto something, but I think even though they're right, or even though their view might be more accurate or supported by science, I don't think that means it's more productive or beneficial to the individual. So this is an example of where function might play a higher role than immediate truth, so to speak. But to your point, if you back up a lot from a God's eye view with all possible data, you go, oh, okay, well, all things considered, that might be true, but that's not the life I want to live. So with more data, with more information, living this way is better. So that's the truth. You know, so it's a lot of semantics. You know, it's like, what do you mean by truth? What do you mean by reality? What do you mean by meaning? Whatever. But I don't know if I'm rambling or if that makes sense.
No, it's great. It's great. Actually, that inspires me to criticize a common, the opposite of basically the conclusion of what we've been talking about. A lot of the times people will, especially in debates, which the debate format is not my favorite, but someone who is arguing, quote unquote, against atheism, which also doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because atheism itself is a negation of something. And so it's just empty space, right? But someone will say something like, you know, in 1 billion years, humans won't be around, the world is going to go up in flames in this fiery heat death of the universe, and, you know, whatever. But that is itself a proposition that things are only worth doing if in 1 billion years humans will be around to think about it. And that is a stupid proposition
and it's a weird
in my world. It's a very
strange
expectation anyway. And it's a bad reason to care about something. And there was a great debate where William Lane Craig, I think it was Craig, Jordan Peterson, and Rebecca Goldstein it was a debate about meaning of life or something huge. Peterson seemed really upset by what Craig had said and said, if you think that the suffering of, you know, a 5-year-old or a child only matters if there's some cosmic billion-year frame to see it through, you are way off. I couldn't imagine, and he didn't say Craig's name, but I think he was immediately responding to that and was basically like, your scale is completely messed up. If you think 1 billion years is the way to view someone suffering today, and Peterson's good at focusing on today, right? So I agree with that too. And like I said, a rock on Mars has no ethical value at all. It's not positive, negative. It's value neutral because there's no suffering involved. There's no flourishing involved. And so ethics, I'm not, maybe I'm in a minority this way. I'm not really that perturbed by the idea that we make it up. We make up our morality and our ethics, and that's fine with me because I'm the only one to incur the consequences. If I knew that tomorrow none of us would be here, it still would matter how we live out the rest of today. and it only matters because we think it matters, and that's enough, because we don't need someone else to care for us to care. We care, and that's enough to rally the troops in a way and make us all go, wait, we're in this together. And if any of us were parachuted onto the earth in any country, in any family, in any situation, or if all three of us had a brain transplant, we had to be the other person with a brain transplant, I would be me in your body. And then I would go, oh shoot, now I have to be this person. I would want your life to be good enough that I wouldn't mind having it. So to me, that's all you need, is just this hypothetical where any moment I could suffer or I could flourish, and that may or may not be up to me. So I want to create the conditions for you to create the conditions for me to flourish, for you to flourish, ad infinitum, right?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I liked that point that you don't need this, so the nihilist, in my opinion, is also is proposing the same thing that the fundamentalist religious person would be saying, in that the nihilist is saying, oh, well, that if things don't matter in a billion years, then they don't matter at all. That person is way off, right?
That's such a
stupid thing to say.
That's such a cool way to think about that. Yeah,
because they're both focusing on the runner.
Well, who said? What is this weird time scale where you're going to die eventually, so nothing matters today? I think it does. I think if I pinched your arm and you were in pain and you suffer as a result, you would care. Clearly people don't walk in front of buses and things like that. And I don't. Was it from Annie Hall, where he's a kid and he lives under the roller coaster and he's telling his mom he doesn't want to do his homework because the universe is expanding and eventually everything's going to be gone, and he's just like, it's a comedic scene because the mom is convincing him just to do his homework. And so there's somewhere between homework and heat death of the universe, there is an ethical realm. And so anyway, the nihilist and the person who's the fundamentalist is going way. It'd be like, well, why do you even want lunch? You're just going to be hungry again. Right? Why brush your teeth? Like, gingivitis is really just such a small concern, because
great way to put
it's like my teeth are just going to get dirty again. Why shower? Why do anything? You're just going to die one day.
Right. Yeah, I think those are both manifestations of the same pathology.
Yeah, that's very true.
I
haven't thought about it like that.
They're extremely opposite, but not really.
Yeah.
They only manifest themselves in opposite ways. But I mean, I totally agree. Like, they're fixated on the wrong thing and then wondering why they're upset. Well, I think it's because the initial expectation was off. It's your whole expectation. And I was having a conversation, I think, with my friend Matthias about this, and we were talking about nihilism, and he was like, dude, I used to struggle with that, and I was like, dude, like, me too. But it's when I realized that it was like, oh, well, it really just depends on what information I feel like focusing on. And this goes back to, like, you can only focus on so many things. Like, the nihilist is like fixated on this
billion year.
Yeah, like the billion year span of, it's like, why? I mean, you choosing to focus on that is no more or less, rational or whatever than choosing to focus on now or choosing to focus on the next 80 years. You can bookend that wherever you want, and this idea that it has to be like this eternal, infinite, both from the fundamentalist perspective and the nihilist perspective, I think is off. And so, like, it's kind of like, so like the nihilist says, why do anything? We're all just going to die. My question is, why not?
Yeah.
Because we're just going to die.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's the same conclusion with a different spin on how your behavior should then reflect that conclusion.
Yeah, for sure. It's fun. It's like you guys are coming from a little bit of the opposite sides, but you guys are agreeing on this, like,
it's beautiful.
There's like a serious like door that's being closed, but it's opening a whole new realm of, like, okay, it sounds like we all agree. How do we reduce suffering, right? That's really what it's all about, is because shit's going to end eventually for everyone and everything. You could say it, why does it matter? But it matters because right now in this moment, you can either feel like shit or not feel like shit.
Yeah.
How do we
And for any, I don't know, nihilists out there, for anyone who truly has nothing to contribute to the world because they think that things need to matter supernaturally or cosmically or something, go be a monk. Go be alone. It's not that bad. Like if you were a Tibetan monk in a cave for 16 years, funny enough, the monk is thinking about the same data. It's not new information that no one's going to exist on Earth in 1 billion years or however long it's going to take, 4 billion years. That's not like a revelation. Everyone knows that. But so then what? So the monk is saying, oh, what a relief. I don't have to be too attached to anything. In fact, if all I do is be nice to other people and get out of the way, then I will have spent my time on Earth well. And lucky me, I get to live in an era of human ingenuity where so as a species, we've developed this ability to look into the future and the past. Actually, side note, I had a teacher who taught my human memory class as an undergrad, and he was brilliant, but he suggested that we developed episodic memory, and that allowed us to see into the future because we're prospectively the only creature who can design a world visually that we want to live in. So some animals can save food, or they can use tools and things like that. But I can say tomorrow, this is what my room is going to look like, and make it that way.
And we can imagine future realities.
Right. Because we can also remember past ones, and so we can see the billions of years behind us and go, oh, there's a future too, and I might not be a part of that future. But what I admire about the monk, who even if it appears a little bit boring, at least they're just not worrying too much about it, and they're not forcing me to come along for their ride. They're not treating me like crap. Yeah. They're not trying to end lives or create suffering. They're just doing the opposite. Like, well, screw it. If I'm not going to be around, I might as well just take in what I can. And if someone comes my way, I can shed a little light on whatever I figured out or whatever I'm going through. But as a matter of experience, the only fact that you can derive from that is, the universe is going to die a heat death in 1 billion years, and I don't care. And great,
exactly,
good for you. So why? So then what? We're all going to do something with that data. Yeah. So go sit in a cave, do something else.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to expectation. I really do.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean,
it is one. Yeah.
Honestly, like for me, I have a few friends who are very, very like hardcore nihilistic, and there are patterns with there are patterns with that kind of person, and I don't like saying that kind of person, but there are patterns with someone who thinks that and lives in that paradigm every day and lives in that narrative every day. They tend to be hyper rational. They tend to be very into science, and I'm not saying everyone who's those things is nihilist, but this is just sort of, as far as I can tell, anecdotally, they tend to have real disappointment about the world, and that's the big one. Why are you so disappointed? Who told you in the first place that you were going to live forever? Who told you in the first place that this wasn't what reality was, or that life wasn't just like this? Because you seem upset that it is like this. How did you get there in the first place? Where did that upsetness come from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it all stems from this initial first expectation that was just wrong. And which is where I think that helps to support the point of seeing the world as it is. That's where I would definitely bring that into play, because if this individual can just see the world as it is and not have ever needed that extra expectation of that, of heaven or whatever else you might be talking about, even from a secular perspective of just humans being immortal or whatever, if you don't need that in the first place, there's nothing to be disappointed about, and there's nothing to just walk around mad about all the time. It's I'm gonna die anyway. It's duh. That's always how it was. Why did you think it was ever going to be anything but that? So it's a strange expectation, and it's actually a problem I have with fundamentalist theology, because it focuses too much on that weird timescale of it's so much evangelical fundamentalist theology says, oh, it's about the afterlife. Don't worry about what's happening now, because this is only temporary. Your real home is later. It's that's not really what Jesus taught, for one. And for two, it's really a dangerous thought, because you're not seeing the world as it is. You're hoping that the world would always just be something else, and you're constantly disappointed, and you're masking all of that. And I'm not saying everyone does this, but this seems to be a trend.
Yeah.
And you're masking that with theology that gives you a false hope in something that it may not be a false hope. Maybe there is something later on, but you don't know. So focus on what's in front of you, because I just can't. And again, nihilism and the fundamentalist Christian might very well be suffering from the same pathologies.
I think that's a very interesting thing that we came to the conclusion of here, is that there's a thread that directly ties those two things together for sure.
Yeah.
So
really
we're wrapping up. I mean, we're about over 2 hours now. So
oh wow,
yeah, that was awesome.
Maybe we should. It's a good note to end.
Let's go get some food. I'm starving.
Cool.
Alrighty, guys. Anyway, we got to do this again with us, and then maybe Ryan can come on next time.
Yeah,
whoever.
So
it's always real.
I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Thank you, guys.